Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here. Let's get it Star Wars. Let's get it Star Wars in here.
A small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio,
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
And just like that, we are back. Back for more, back from our little summer break. Hope everybody had a good 4th. The 4th being like on that Tuesday, it really kind of spread out. The holiday taken. I was certainly glad to have the time off. Certainly glad to be back with all of you here on Rebel Force Radio. Got a lot to talk about. I had hoped that I would be able to talk about all the great Amazon Prime deals on Star Wars merch. I was really excited about that. You know, the way Amazon does the big 2-day sale, Amazon Prime Days. Gives you, you know, it's just like come and buy all our stuff. It's kind of like their own little Black Friday in the middle of July. And I thought, oh, this will be great. Maybe I can pick up. I was thinking about maybe some of those Black Series helmets and some of the, you know, the pricier items that I might be able to save $20, $30 on. No, nothing. Some Star Wars Lego. That's all I found on Amazon Prime Days. No action figures. I don't know. If you scored some stuff, send us a note, show at rebelforceradio.com. But anyway, we've got so much to talk about this week. The big news is that Ahsoka trailer, the official trailer, dropped this week, and we're going to be doing, of course, a scene-by-scene, shot-by-shot analysis, as you've come to expect here on Rebel Force Radio. Also, speaking of Lego, there were actually some clues about the Ahsoka series hidden in a Lego announcement. I'm talking about the toys here, not like a special or cartoon or anything. I'm talking about a Lego set had a little Easter egg that was a clue to what we can expect on when Ahsoka starts. Also, I mean, talk about burying the lead here. I should have just started with this because we have a world premiere this week. We are back in such a big way this week with the world premiere, brand new track. And it slaps and it swings from Puppet Lando. This deal's getting worse, but you got to wait. That's coming up later in the program. And lots more. And I mean lots more. And here to help with all of that is, of course, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Glad to be back for some Rebel Force Radio. I kept myself busy during our break. Really did a good job unplugging, which is not something I often do. I did have that moment where I looked at myself in the mirror and said, hey, your collecting is maybe a little out of control. It's kind of spiraling, if you will. You're running out of space. You really might want to take a break. And I had that moment where I said, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for real. And then I logged on to Amazon and ordered 6 action figures. So,
wait a minute. How long between the decision to take a break and you logging on to Amazon? I'm guessing it was hours, right? Minutes?
No, it all happened. It was just a succession of thoughts and mood swings.
Oh.
And it all happened at once.
And states of sobriety, probably, right? As various.
Well, I can't remember, so yes. But I think it was the fact that I said, well, I'm going to unplug, but I just want to make sure there was nothing I was leaving behind. I just had to make sure. And I found 6 things, so I took care of that. And I did take advantage of an Amazon Prime Star Wars deal.
Oh, you did? What did you find?
I'm not going to tell you until it arrives.
Oh, man.
So I only ordered yesterday, and this was on the suggestion of my son, Dylan.
He found
tipped
it
me off
for
to
you.
it. Yeah, it was a good tip.
Oh.
he just felt like, it should probably be in our house, this particular item. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. This should be in our house. That's our clue.
Yes. I'll give you one other clue. It's an item from a streaming series. And that's all you're going to get.
Okay.
That's all you're going to get. It's not from the film. It's from a streaming series. But I spent my time during this break. Like I said, I really unplugged. There is one thing I definitely did do that was very steeped in Star Wars during this break. I've seen Pink Floyd. I would have loved to have seen Taylor Swift last time she was in town. I did go to see a lot of live music during the 4th of July week, but one was very steeped in Star Wars. I saw the Chicago Symphony Orchestra perform the soundtrack to The Force Awakens as the film was being screened.
Wow.
And there we were in Orchestra Hall, myself, Tyler Page, and Christian Mack, Barry Harmon too, with sleeping daughter.
Was this outdoor or was this indoor?
It was inside.
It was inside. Okay.
It was inside. We had a great time. And I saw that movie kind of with a different perspective. I was just seeing it all. It seemed very fresh to me. And I wasn't obsessed with what came after it and all of that. I was just very in the moment while I was watching it. And I just let the story sort of just wash over me and onto me. And I was fascinated in watching the orchestra members, especially the timpani player, when Kylo Ren makes his entrance and that music kicks in and that timpani, and it was a blast. We had a great time. And
I got to ask how they handled Jabba Flow. Did they have live singers, or were the vocals
Jabba Flow
taken in
doesn't
from
really. That's more like incidental background music.
It's atmosphere,
when you see
yeah.
the film.
Yeah.
It doesn't really pop at you. It really doesn't pop at you.
It is pretty buried in the mix. You're right. I don't
It's
know
very
why.
buried.
I think
Yeah.
it's because
So
we've listened to it so much, as a track.
We've heard the actual track.
Yeah, right.
But it's not really audible when you see the film. It's more background sound. And so that's how they treated it in this performance. But it's fascinating to watch. And I developed a whole different sort of appreciation for how well crafted a film The Force Awakens is. Not necessarily the story itself, but just the way the film unfolds. And the tone of it and the pacing and everything. So, yeah, good times. And that's the first time I've ever actually seen an orchestra play the soundtrack while screening the film. I've seen an orchestra play selections from the Star Wars soundtrack. I saw Star Wars in concert, but this was a first. And I thought I'd be bored during it. But as it turns out, I was completely enthralled in the entire thing. So,
well, it's a very popular way to get people to the concert halls, the theaters. We've got a couple of them coming up in Cleveland, not Star Wars, but they're actually doing that first Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. That's starting to be done with a live orchestra and a live DJ on stage, like wicked kind of DJ. So I mean, it's
crazy.
Yeah, so it's a great way to I have firmly believed, I didn't coin this expression, but I remember hearing that film soundtracks and film scores are the classical music of this generation, and have been probably since guys like John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith started composing for film. And so it's great to see kids of all ages, everybody, come back to the concert halls, give them another reason to come to the concert halls and watch these professional musicians. So you couple it with a film. Who cares? You're still getting an appreciation for the artistry of these musicians. So I'm all for it. I think it's great.
It was great. And I do have to say the ticket was a gift from local Star Wars superfan Suds. Our friend Suds. So, he gifted me the ticket because he couldn't make it. So I really appreciate that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I also developed a new collecting obsession over the break, and that is these Marvel comics. They have these action figure variant covers.
Oh, look at
where they look like vintage Star Wars action figures on the card. And this was a holographic Darth Maul that came out recently. Well, I got my hands on this, and now I'm going nuts. and I'm trying to find them all.
I've got to collect them all.
And it's just really great because I've really become more of a digital comics guy. So I miss collecting comic books. And this gives me a really nice focus. These action figure variant covers. So, and I get my comic books locally at Blurred's Underground in LaGrange, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. It's at 15.5 South LaGrange Road. Blurred's Underground. That's where you want to go if you're in the Chicago area to get comics.
Blurred's.
Star Wars comics, they have everything. Check them out, Blurred's Underground. I love those guys. They're friends of mine. They're friends of Rebel Force Radio. I'd love to do a live show from Blurred's at some time.
I keep thinking you're saying blurg.
Blurred, B-L-E-R-D.
Right, the blurg.
Blurred's Underground.
Blurred's.
Dr. Jones.
Give him hell, Indiana Jones.
It was great to get back in the theaters, too, and I had to go see Indiana Jones. I was there opening day at noon.
You were.
To see. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Boy,
yeah.
I tell you what,
After all this time waiting for it, I just, we cover the Lucasfilm stuff so heavily, and Indiana Jones, the kissing cousin of Star Wars, always has been. It has that Star Wars DNA. The combination of Harrison Ford, John Williams, George Lucas, it's always been very obvious. And Ben Burt. Let's not forget, Ben did all the audio for the original films. I don't think he was present at all in the mixing room for this one. But John Williams was sure there applying the oxygen and everything. And
Yeah, he sure was.
I was there. And Jason, did you go see it right away when it opened?
I did. Well, I went on Saturday because I wanted to wait. I tried to get the whole family to go, but the kids, they just, these kids and their iPads, they just have no appreciation,
Well, I went by myself.
No, Deborah went with me. We wanted to have a little date night, so we went out. But man, 40 minutes of previews where I was. 40 minutes of previews. So it was a long night. Finally, the movie came on, and I had a ball. I actually enjoyed it from beginning to end. I went into it pretty frustrated because of everything that I was reading online that was so negative. Not that I don't think that people have the right to feel the way they feel about a movie. It's gotten to the point where people are not content with just saying, I didn't really care for it. I didn't really like it. I thought this. Their job is to convince you that if you do like it, that you are wrong or that there is something wrong with you. And a lot of times they want to do it before you even had a chance to see the film. So I went hoping that these people that I was listening to were going to be wrong. And I feel that they were wrong. I feel that a lot of them had preconceived notions and they created a self-fulfilling prophecy for themselves and had all of these ideas, and then they kind of shoved what they saw into some of those narratives in their heads, and they came out going, "Yep, it's just what I thought." I tried to go in and with as low expectations as possible, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it's an Indiana Jones movie. I'm not looking for Casablanca or Citizen Kane here. I'm looking to have fun and enjoy myself. And I
think the original Raiders of the Lost Ark film, I think you can place it with films of the status of Casablanca and the great films of the past. It's that classic sort of film. I've always said Raiders is a rare example of what is a perfect film. And there are very few movies I feel that about. But I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is a perfect film.
I rewatched all of them leading up to going back to the theater because I wanted them to be fresh. And I've said on this show over the years, I've said to you, Jim, and I know it's fighting words a lot of times with other indie fans, as I've said, Raiders, I just never liked Raiders as much as everybody else. Last Crusade was when I really discovered Indiana Jones. And a lot of times it has to do with where you are in life when you find the character for the first time. It's not necessarily what you see, it's when you see it.
Sure. That's your Indiana Jones.
That's my Indiana Jones. But I will tell you, going back and watching Raiders, this last time, it really impacted me more, I think, than it has on any other viewing. Maybe because I was gearing up for Indy's last adventure. So watching his first, well, not chronologically, but canonic or release-wise, his first adventure. Because Temple of Dome is technically a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
But, you know. So I was really just paying attention as much as I possibly could. And I think I see what everyone has loved about that movie. When you talk about being a perfect movie, I see why you say that, because the cadence of that movie, there is no downtime. There's no wasted dialogue. There's no wasted anything. And if I had to be critical of Dial of Destiny, I didn't feel that way about Dial of Destiny, where I did think that things went on a little bit too long. Not like Raiders. I don't know why everyone thinks these movies have to be like 128 minutes now, you know? What's wrong with a good, solid 100 minutes?
Yes. The length of films over the last 20-something years, I'd say it kind of started with movies like The Lord of the Rings and Gladiator. These films are clocking in
Titanic.
2.5 hours. Well, and then Titanic, of course.
Yeah.
So you have this, all of a sudden, the rules being broken with cinema, and the length of these presentations went from 2 hours to 2.5 to sometimes 3. And that presents a bit of fatigue, you know, when you're asking audiences to go back to the theater every weekend, you know?
Yeah.
It seemed like there was more of that sort of cadence going on in the 80s and 90s, where people were going to the theater more often. It was more affordable. The screening times were shorter. They weren't tacking on 40 minutes of previews and commercials.
Yes.
And all that garbage. So that's one reason why I think box office is suffering now for tentpole films, is because studios are expecting you to go see a tentpole film 2-3 times a month now. And in that case, they're going to suffer. And then the length of time makes people think twice about scheduling a block in their week to go to the theater.
Yep.
The pricing has made people reconsider. I mean, I love the experience, those recliners and stuff. I love all of that. Going to a theater is way better than it used to be, but the films themselves are big and bloated and too long in a lot of cases. And Dial of Destiny, I think it suffers from that a little bit.
Yeah.
Where there's a CIA subplot that I think could have been snipped with no problem. It seemed to make things a little confusing. And Mads Mikkelsen, I couldn't understand half the stuff coming out of that guy's mouth throughout the whole film. That made things confusing for me. But none of that matters, because I'm a super fan. So any additional time I get to spend with the heroes of my youth is good. That's time well spent. I'm really happy. And so that, you know, let's face it, that's why I pay top dollar to go to concerts by bands like Dead & Company, Eric Clapton, the Eagles, Roger Waters from Floyd, guys like that. I know they're not at the top of their game. I'm just happy for a chance to see them do their thing one more time while they still can.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor for Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones. Fantastic. It really
exactly
is.
What it is.
I want to see him doing his thing, right?
And I'm happy the film doesn't ignore that. They make it about a guy who spent his life looking into the past, studying it, visiting ancient locales. That's what he did. Now he's past his prime. And he's living in a world that has moved on beyond him. So, like, where does he fit in? What's his purpose in contemporary times, in 1969 for Indiana Jones? He's a guy whose youth is clearly behind him now. And let's face it, even in his prime, he never cared for the time he was living in the first place. He was always looking to the past.
Right.
That's where he would find adventure, is by uncovering the mysteries of the past and then making sure they were preserved in a museum, not even scoring cash for them. And so then we catch up with him. It's like time in this era for Indy doesn't mean anything to him. And I think that's when he retires. They give him that clock. The first thing he does is he walks outside and gives it to a dude on the sidewalk. It means nothing to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So time is a very present thing throughout this whole thing. To the MacGuffin itself, which can control time. I mean, I just really loved spending the time with Harrison Ford back as Indiana Jones. I thought the action pieces were all outstanding. I didn't think they necessarily put Harrison in any positions where I thought it was just too outrageous and unbelievable. Well, I'm sure they were hanging off of an airplane at one point. But, I mean, it's Indiana Jones, so there's a little bit of a superhero edge applied to him anyway. The film itself, does it live up to the first original 3? No, but I felt like while I'm sitting there in the movie, I'm like, this is scratching all the right itches, and I'm glad they didn't pretend he wasn't old.
Yeah, I do think it's a better film than Crystal Skull. I think it's a better Indiana Jones movie than Crystal Skull.
I think it's a much more rich story about the character. So, like, all the crazy stuff happening around him, it almost seems secondary to the character himself, you know? And the action pieces were great. So as I look at it, it is kind of bittersweet to see Indiana Jones past his prime. I mean, really nobody, but I mean, he can still do his thing, you know?
Yeah.
Bob Dylan's still out there touring, and he's definitely not hitting any notes, you know? But he's still Bob Dylan, and he's still performing, and it's still like the songs are still the songs. It's the power of that. And Indiana Jones's song is this last movie. So, you know, time is a concept very present in the film. And the film itself is really a celebration of Indiana Jones, one of the greatest action heroes of all time, right?
I know that a lot of people were questioning, and it was interesting because I heard so many people, even our own good pals, saying, I don't know how I feel about the end. I don't know how I feel. And so I knew that there was some, confusion's not the word, but maybe just some unease with the ending of the films when I went into it. And I didn't have that reaction at all. I loved the end. I loved the decision that Indy was trying to make. Everybody was talking about, like, oh, this is a total betrayal of the Indiana Jones character. He's going to destroy the timeline by being in the past. And my thought was, no, he thought he was just going to bleed out there on the beach and go out watching this battle that he had spent so many years reading about. His life was over. He didn't have a place. He was separated from the love of his life. His son had died. I mean, put yourself in that. His father is gone. And he didn't feel that he had anything to live for. So I don't think that was a betrayal at all. And as far as Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, I think she was great. She served her purpose. She did exactly what she was there to do. Coming up, we're not going to cover that specifically, but I can tell you James Mangold has said that he has absolutely zero interest in spinning Phoebe off into her own series. This was never about creating a character that was going to take up the mantle of Indiana Jones, don the hat, and then go off into her own franchise. I don't think that is at all what James Mangold was doing. Now, Kathleen Kennedy has jumped and said, oh, well, we're not saying that that's not on the table. You know, we'll have to take a look at it. Well, Kathleen Kennedy, I would expect nothing less from her. But I thought that Phoebe Waller-Bridge was a great foil for Indy at that stage of his life. And then at the very end, for him to be reunited with Marion again, and, you know, even down to the little, you know, what do they call that? The little, they did that with End of Mandalorian this year too, where the iris, you know, closes up and on the Indy hat. I thought it was fantastic. The whole allusion to Raiders with, you know, doesn't hurt here, it doesn't hurt here, you know, all of that. I thought it was great. I just thought it was great. And I thought it was a real fitting ending for certainly one of my biggest heroes growing up.
Yes. I mean, I saw it twice.
Oh, did you?
The
I
first
need
time-
to see it
yeah.
again. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I saw it, I thought it was fine. The second time I saw it, I loved it. So that to me, and I'm being honest with myself and everything as I'm watching this movie, but I sure did like it a lot more the second time it happened. And I think that's because they throw a lot of things at you rapid fire. And I still am kind of fuzzy about certain things because, like I said, I couldn't understand what Mads Mikkelsen was saying half the time. It was just hard. The mix is rough with these things sometimes. And but I mean, Phoebe, she, like you said, Jason, she did what she was there to do. I thought she stayed in her lane largely. I did too. I didn't think she was too preachy with him or either. I thought the quips with Indy reminded me of the back and forth between him and Marion and Raiders. I really felt it had that element to it. And I felt like, her youth was a necessary component. Because it can't just be an 80-year-old guy running around. Nor can it be an 80-year-old guy with his girl Marion running around. You're doubling down on the geriatric quality of the film. You have to have a balance, and Phoebe provided that balance.
Yeah.
And the ending, people were upset he wanted to stay. I mean, why? Like I said, he's a guy who didn't feel like he had a place in current society, even when he was in his prime. He was always looking back, and he was always looking to the past for adventure and excitement and to provide a little bit of justice sometimes, too. And I think Indy just cherished the notion, the idea of living his final hours or his final days within history itself.
Yeah,
where he always belonged, He finally found his place.
Yeah, he's a relic of the past.
Essentially.
Yeah, a few hundred years later than them, but still he feels as irrelevant in his time as these guys would be. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to me. I did love the little nod when he talks about his watch, about it being his dad's, which immediately you see that iconic, image in your mind of Sean Connery. And some of it too, Jim, I think. And I don't mean this to sound patronizing, so I don't want people to take it the wrong way. But when you get north of 45, movies like this about an aging hero, they take on a little bit different meaning. And if you're 30 years old or 25 years old and you got the world on a string and it depresses you to see a movie about a guy in his upper 70s, wait a few years, wait a couple of decades, and you might go back and watch that movie and feel a little bit differently. Because there were some things that I could feel that I could relate to a little bit with Indy when you look around. Like when he's on the bus and he looks and he sees the kid wearing the space, outfit, and he just kind of, it shakes his head.
That's you looking at somebody with shaved whatever and pierced
blue
whatever
hair and a bullhorn and all
whatever.
that. Right. Exactly.
Look at this person. I would not want to sit next to you in public transit. There's no way. That would be just like judge, jury, and executioner all in one swanky package. But I kid. Give him hell, Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Oh,
I mean, how
Sala.
could you dislike a movie with a line like that? I mean, I love that.
And I love
Give him hell with the fist pump and everything.
I know. I thought that was great, and I think that they employed restraint. They could have thrown Sala in there in some big action scene, and it would have, now you got two old codgers in there doing.
That's just it.
To give Sala that role that Indy helped him and his whole family get to America during the war, and Sala's driving a taxi cab. It's just perfect. I'm like, of course he is. Of course he is.
Stuff.
Yeah.
I love the underwater sequence, something we've never seen in an Indiana Jones film before.
Crazy,
but it almost felt like an underwater recreation of the temple,
The Well of Souls.
The Well of the Souls, exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of snakes, you have eels. Instead of Indy fending them off with a torch, he's got an underwater flare.
Why did it have to be eels?
Yeah, and eels are coming out of skeletons' mouths and out of the skulls and stuff. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is the well of the souls underwater.
Right.
Fantastic. And then the de-aging part at the beginning, I thought was a pretty great use of the technology. And, people were complaining, saying it looked like a video game cutscene. I don't see that at all. I think this is a big step forward in special effects. It certainly felt like more like a living, breathing person as opposed to like Governor Tarkin from Rogue One that was almost like a marionette,
Yeah.
A marionette controlled by Gollum.
Yeah, it's a tall order because, and we've talked about this on the show before. We as human beings understand we understand subconsciously what we don't consciously, and there's body language, and we've evolved to detect the slightest eye movement in other human beings. So the fact that there's a lot of times where this fooled me speaks volumes, I think, to where the technology is now and where it's going. It's going to get to that point where it's indistinguishable. Of course.
And Lucasfilm will be leading the charge.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see how that employs itself into future Star Wars productions. And that's one thing I'm looking at while I'm watching this film. And I'm also looking at the James Mangold touch.
Yes.
Which I felt like, you know what? He put his own feel on it while still giving it that Spielberg foundation throughout, I thought.
Yes.
So it was definitely a different movie, a different time, a different character altogether. And again, I think it's a relief that it was more of a celebration of the timeless quality of Indiana Jones as being revealed to us through him at 80 years old.
Right.
I don't know if for a fact Indiana Jones is supposed to be 80 years old in this film. I think the film would then have to take place in the 80s. If that
yes, I've heard people. Yeah, I've never paid much attention, but I do think he has a distinct birth date that might have been revealed in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles or something. I think there is a specific date of when he was born. So yeah, people were doing the math and all of that, and I get it. It's good. The other thing I wanted to mention is, when you see these interviews with Harrison Ford, he's very open about the fact that he was nervous about opening the film with him in his youth, in his prime. He thought that was going to then kind of ruin it once he's there as an old man. And Mangold is interesting. There's this Variety article. We'll talk about it in a little bit on the show, but it's a great long article in Variety, interview with James Mangold, and he talks about being on the set of I think it's called Call of the Wild. Is that the film he did with Harrison prior to this? And
I loved that movie.
I haven't seen that. I want to now because of the Mangold Ford chemistry, but apparently that was during the filming of that. Harrison was sort of dealing with, I think at the time, still George and Stephen and Kathleen Kennedy wanting to do another indie movie, and there was a lot of discussions. And interestingly enough, in between takes and during breaks, James Mangold and Harrison started chatting about Indiana Jones, the character, and it was almost like therapy sessions. James Mangold was kind of talking Harrison, helping sort of talk Harrison through this stuff, and that's why when Spielberg decided not him, it was Harrison Ford that suggested to Lucasfilm that it be James Mangold, and then Spielberg said, yeah, absolutely, that's the guy. But Mangold really believed that making it, to your exact point earlier, Jim, about age, confronting it head on, not ignoring his age, that was really the key. And he wanted him to go in the film from Indy in his prime to Indy asleep in that chair with the loud music coming on, and him, showing him with his shirt off and showing his, old man chest and his gray hairs and all of that. That was all purposeful. And there are some people out there that go, that's demasculating him and that's making him look like a loser and all this stuff. And it's like, no, it's making him look old because we're all going to be old someday. And
prime.
Yeah. And so it's so frustrating when people use something that's very much out in the open as a criticism, as if, it's some subliminal message that they're just trying to embarrass Indiana Jones. I didn't get that at all from this film, that this was an effort to embarrass the character or the actor or anything like that. I think it was a total...
And nor would Harrison Ford stand for something like that,
Right,
So
of course not.
He's too damn cool. And he's so cool he can play Indiana Jones 10 years younger than he really is, because Indy's birth year is 1899, according to, I guess, something established in the Young Indy series. Or if you do the math and figure out how old River Phoenix is at the beginning of... because they show the year there. It's like in the teens, the 19 teens.
Yeah.
And so he's, 14 or 15 in that, maybe even older. So Indy is 70 in Dial of Destiny. He's 70 years old. So Harrison is playing a man 10 years younger than he is.
Yeah.
So
I think he pulls it off, personally.
Well, of course, because he's Harrison flipping Ford, and he's durable. He's still got stamina. I mean, for an 80-year-old, there's a few guys like that I know who are that old and still can bring it. I mean, geez, look at Mick Jagger. He can still bring it up on stage, running all around and stuff. And he's 79. So
I definitely I think it's a much better film than Crystal Skull. It's not Raiders of the Lost Ark for me. It's not Last Crusade. Last Crusade, just having Harrison and Sean Connery in that film together, even if you have misgivings about some of the plot lines, or if you think that it's sort of too derivative from Raiders, those two on screen are absolute magic. Just charisma out the wazoo. So it's not going to be that. But I thought it was a far better film than Crystal Skull, and a very worthy final chapter in that story.
Absolutely. I don't waste time saying, is this a film that was made just because it could be made? Because the truth is yes. And
all movies are like that.
Right.
I mean,
and I'm glad they spared no expense to bring us Indiana Jones's final chapter, because what's going to be everlasting is this film. You know what isn't going to be everlasting? Talk about the box office and what the budget for this film was.
Dude, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I went off a little bit online. I tried to keep my cool, and I noticed that you kind of had the same observation. Since when do we start measuring our enjoyment or potential enjoyment of a film with box office numbers? How boring is that? Why are we debating box office receipts? You know how many movies I loved as a kid that tanked in the movie theater? Lots. How many Howard the Duck fans are there out there? Admit it. Some of you love that movie, and you should love that movie, but it was terrible. It did awful at the box office. There's so many movies that tanked.
Of box office bombs that have lived as legends beyond their time in the theaters, and we all know what they are. When did we set standards so high where we can look at a $300 million movie that provides us with all the thrills of this final Indiana Jones chapter, and which is a fitting end to his story?
Can you imagine being on the
fretting over what Bob Iger's going to see in his bonus?
Right.
Why are we fretting?
Can you imagine being on the playground and Empire Strikes Back comes out and the kids are all excited? You're like, well, I don't know. It only made $60 million in the first weekend, so
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, really. The second weekend there was a drop off of 58%. That's unheard of, and a disaster for a tentpole film like that.
You'd have gotten beat up if you'd have said that.
It's like, you know what? If a kid said that to me when I was 12 years old, I'd punch him right in the face as hard as I could.
There's no heart in that talk. It's all so tedious and boring. Ugh.
That was never part of the film-going experience for me when the original Indiana Jones trilogy came out. And it was the furthest thing from my mind or from any discussions I had with other fellow fans.
Yeah.
I really don't understand how box office works, though, because I know countless numbers of people who've gone to see this Indiana Jones movie, and I don't know a damn soul who has said a word to me about Avatar. You know, nobody.
That is
I don't get it.
absolutely
I don't
crazy.
get
You're
it.
so right. You're so right. I know no one that saw Avatar, the sequel.
No one.
And yet it did great box office.
Now, of course, the Indiana Jones thing, it skews more toward our demographic
Well,
in the
that's
first
true.
place. So naturally, we're right in the thick of things.
Where would you like to see, real quick, the Indy franchise go from here? Do you think it's over? You think there's television potential? You think there's animated series potential? What do you think the future of Indy is?
There's always been animated series potential for this Indiana Jones franchise. And perhaps a streaming series 20 years after Harrison Ford dies. Okay? And Harrison will probably live to be 110. But I think there's always going to be potential in the future for the character. I mean, there's going to be.
Yeah.
I personally would think there's a lot of potential in animated series.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I've just been on an Indiana Jones high from seeing the film, watching the new one, or watching all the classic films on 4K, the new 4K releases, playing with the action figures. I've just been having a ball. So I've had a good indie summer so far.
Give him hell, Indiana Swank.
What do you say we do a little listener mail? How about that?
Okay.
All right.
Must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message? Message after the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey, Jason and Jimmy. This is Justin from Pittsburgh. And I just want to say, big fan of the show. And just real quick, I wanted to drop a Ray theory. I know I finished listening to your show this week. And it's something that's been on my mind since I saw The Last Skywalker. So I saw it on opening day. And the very first time I saw it, as I'm watching it live, I noticed at the end how whenever they go through the whole switcheroo with the death of Kylo, the death of Rey, well, whenever Ben brings Rey back to life, I distinctly remember seeing this in the theater. When he puts his hand over her stomach, immediately the first thing I thought of was New Prophet, right? I mean, it makes the most sense, and it's been how many years now since that movie came out. I think once, maybe somebody bring up the theory on it, maybe twice, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like it could be kind of like a reset of things, and at least a way of explaining how he passed his life force over into Rey, and would even justify even giving Rey the Skywalker last name. I don't know. Just want your guys' thoughts. Love the show. Like I said, something's been on my mind for a couple of years. I really hear it, and I don't think I hear too many people take it seriously. And just want your thoughts, and love what you're doing. Thanks. Bye.
Hey, man, thanks for that. I think I remember a tummy touch at some point. I certainly don't think that was the intention. Now, it could have been all right, forgive me for doing this Star Trek analogy. I know people get tired of that sometimes, but I'm going to throw this out there. They're making Star Trek 2. Leonard Nimoy did not want to come back. He wanted that to be his last Star Trek movie. They killed off Spock, but they wrote in a loophole, and that loophole was the mind meld with McCoy. Remember. They didn't have to pick up that thread, but when they convinced Nimoy to come back for the third one, they offered him the director's chair. That was the hook that they were able to use to bring Spock back. So if there is indeed a tummy touch, while that may not have been the primary, motive for it is, we're going to come back and we're going to do this. Maybe it was one of those little insurance policies or little things that little thread that they could leave there and then tug when they need to. But Jim, do you remember this moment? The tummy touch?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's after Rey has died.
Okay.
And Kylo is there, and he has her in his lap.
Uh-huh.
And he puts his hand on her stomach and closes his eyes.
Okay.
And then the Force passes through him into her, and that revitalizes her. But whoops, Kylo overdid it. And not only did he give Rey enough Force power to snap to consciousness, he gave her all of his Force power, thus killing him in the process. He drained his own battery, giving another Jedi a jump start. So he overdid it, and that's when Kylo died. But yes, specifically, he put his hand on her stomach as she laid there prone. Jason has the clip here.
I got the clip. I'm muting it so we don't get copyright strike here. But
well, there's no real dialogue anyway.
Yeah,
but
so
you see, she's dead. She is dead.
Oh yeah,
and he holds her in his lap while he's sitting. And at this point, he puts his hand on her stomach. You'll see. He looks around to make sure nobody's looking.
Yeah, yeah. She's eyes open, dead.
Oh yeah, she's dead. He even holds her up to his ear. Now she's not breathing. She's definitely not breathing, Kylo. So what are you gonna do? We're gonna go to the trunk. You're gonna get those jumper cables, and you're gonna hook them up. You have to know your positives and your negatives, and then just hook it up correctly. Be sure to ground that sucker. There's the hand on the stomach.
The hand on the stomach.
He closes his eyes. Life Force passes through him into her.
Now, Jim, you used the expression, he overdid it. It's not the first time we've seen a Jedi overdo it. Remember Qui-Gon Jinn in the bongo putting old Jar Jar to sleep. Yeah. There it is.
See, that's the
Close
exact
up.
opposite. You suck the life force out of someone to put them to sleep. It's kind of like a sleeper hold. You cut off their oxygen. And so actually Qui-Gon was feeling pretty good because he had some Jar Jar Binks energy flowing through him.
Misa no think so. So there it is. So so the theory of our caller is that could this be the Force doing another a reset? All right, let's try this again. And
I love that you bring up Star Trek II and that moment when Spock goes to Bones, he puts his hand on it, he goes, remember.
Right.
Yeah, that just plants the seed. And we didn't know when we saw that movie what that was all about. Remember?
Yeah.
And at Bones, the next movie, Bones is all like drooling in a cup and stuff. They can't figure him out.
Right. He's got
Bones
Spock rattling around in his head.
Yeah, so maybe we'll get some of that erratic behavior from Rey. But no, Kylo passed away. So I guess the only way he can ever come back is via the Force as a spirit.
Right.
Which is a discipline he may not have ever learned.
Do you think that's a cool idea that they could perhaps have his legacy live on because in some way that she would give birth to their Force child?
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Or give birth to Kylo himself. He's reincarnated now.
Oh, wow.
And he's Rey's son.
Okay, he's Rey's son, and he's also Leia and Han's son. So Kylo has two mommies.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I kind of like the idea better that it's their child together.
Yeah, I didn't like that idea either. I just spit it out there,
Hey,
we got the whiteboard out. We can cross that off the whiteboard here in the writers' room, the RFR writers' room.
You throw that spaghetti up on the wall. We'll see what sticks. But I love the theory, and I think the caller has a great observation there, and I have not heard anyone else bring this up. Not to say it hasn't been talked about, but I don't recall it being talked about.
Yeah, well, it's an observation that we should probably pay some attention to with a new Rey movie coming out in 2026.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, who knows what kind of curveballs they'll be throwing at us, but that's one as a screenwriter, I would I would play off of that a little bit.
Yeah.
What's this? Why is he put his hand on her head? Why the stomach?
Yeah.
What's going on there? Is he putting something in there?
He was copping a feel.
Oh, well, yeah, he's a big stomach fetish guy.
Right. Hey, we just got off of our summer break, and when there's no new RFR, I know that can be a very difficult thing for all of you, but for those that are subscribers and supporters on Patreon, you don't have to deal with the no RFR blues because there's always something exciting happening on Patreon.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we did take some time off, so it's been a little quiet there the last week or so. But this week at RFR on Patreon, we just dropped RFR Q&A number 172, Star Wars Play-Doh, featuring Eric from Phoenix. Don't worry, it's not a whole show about Star Wars Play-Doh, but it does come up. And Eric has a great report from the Phoenix Fan Fusion Convention, including clips from panels with The Mandalorian's Katie Sackhoff and Solo's Paul Bettany. So Eric from Phoenix, a regular VIP, hosting RFR Q&A. And that's how you get to host an episode of RFR Q&A with me, is by becoming an RFR VIP. But there are tiers, many different tiers on Patreon that will suit your desire to hear more content, to have access to more content, or just whatever fits your budget. Because all contributions to RFR are greatly appreciated. And even if you just contribute $1, you're going to be getting bonus content in the form of RFR Q&A, 3 or 4 of those a month, tons of exclusive audio podcasts, full show video, ad-free podcasts. There's a lot going on Patreon. Some people were actually thanking me for taking a week off so they can get caught up on all the content we're putting out on Patreon. Other people were thanking me for Patreon just to have an alternative for weeks when there are no RFR. And those weeks are rare and few and far between, but they do happen. And then a lot of people they can't get enough. They want more than the weekly show. And you become a member of a great community there on Patreon, too, where the conversation is always educated and positive and honest and upbeat. So that's what you want to do. Check us out, patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right. Well, we know what the big news is. That's right. The Ahsoka trailer, the official trailer, dropped. I heard some scuttlebutt online that this was supposed to drop a while ago, like about a week or so earlier than it actually did. There was some speculation and it got held up for whatever reason, but it did drop and got the big 2-episode premiere coming up August 23rd, Disney Plus. Jim, have they said how many episodes there are of this? Are we looking at 8?
Yes.
Like Mando? Okay, so this will follow the Mando formula. And
exactly.
Book of Boba Fett.
That's the Favreau Filoni verse. That's the standard.
Yeah. So you want to do it? You want to get into it?
Let's do it.
All right, let's
get into it.
Let's get into the Ahsoka trailer, and let's start her up.
Imperial shuttle or some sort of shuttle.
Must destroy.
Goes real fast here, so we'll try to.
Yeah.
What we saw with right here is some sort of attack. This looks like it's a New Republic cruiser of some sort. These are New Republic officers that are being beat up pretty bad and killed by these two, Baylan Skull and Shin Hati.
One must destroy.
Yeah, they're making quick work of these guys. Look at that.
Right. Yeah,
and this
Shin
looks
is just slicing them down left and right. Here they are in the hallway. The hallway kind of resembles the classic Rebel blockade runner hallway that
I was just going to say. This is giving shades. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised, Jim, if episode 1 of season 1 of Ahsoka opens with this, because this is just so iconic as far as the opening of a Star Wars film, where you've got the baddies attacking the not the Rebel ship in this case, but the New Republic ship. Of course, we saw Matt Lanter in season 1 of The Mandalorian wearing a similar costume here.
Yep. Yeah.
Uniform.
The blue. They do look sort of like the Rebel blockade runner soldiers, but they're wearing more of a blue sort of jumpsuit thing.
Yeah.
White
I like those white Pat Boone shoes they got going there.
White shoes. What are these, like stormtrooper leftovers they picked up at the Goodwill store?
I think that's what they got going on.
In order to create.
Balin's skull coming down that corridor using the Force.
We are no Jedi. Taking out the poor, probably the commander. This is the Captain Antilles, I think, of this particular ship. But he does say something very reminiscent of what we've heard Ahsoka say before, which is, he says, "We are no Jedi."
Right.
And, of course, that echoes Ahsoka's "I am no Jedi" line. So
it just has vibes of General Zod and the gang busting out of the Phantom Zone in Superman 2. It's just, I'm getting those kind of vibes from these Force users. Who are they? Where have they been? Why do they have orange sabers? I don't understand. And there's other clues throughout this trailer that indicate to me that no, these guys are Jedi. Why is he saying I'm no Jedi? Later in the trailer, he references Anakin. So
he does, and we know from the late actor Ray Stevenson's own mouth, as he reported to Empire Magazine, that he used to be a member of the Jedi Order, and he's an Order 66 survivor. So
right,
he may know
something went south with these guys at some point. And where have they been? Then, if they're that powerful and they're Jedi that have been able to escape the purge, where have they been? Phantom Zone or something like that. World Between Worlds.
Of Thrawn's return.
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but she's in the Jedi Temple and she's looking at some of these paintings on the wall. Don't know if this ends up being something, but it's always interesting to look at some of these fine details. So Ahsoka's in the Jedi Temple.
What Jedi Temple?
I think she's in
the
Jedi Temple is my assumption.
On Coruscant. Interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire.
There they go, dropping that heir to the Empire. Now here's the sort of Stonehenge-looking thing. We've seen this in the other trailers. And then we'll see it illuminated here shortly, which is potentially the gateway of some sort.
Well, this is what I think is that planet Tython that we saw in Mandalorian Season 2, where Baby Yoda sat on that communication stone and reached out to Luke that way. It seems like that Stonehenge sort of design is.
Oh, have we seen this before? That. We saw this in Mandalorian?
Well, that's why I'm thinking. There's just a similarity that I'm noting here.
Okay. Oh, I got you. Okay.
Right. And Ahsoka sure seemed, she's the one who was aware of that spot in the first place. That's where she told Din to take Grogu. So she's clearly been there before. Right.
Okay. So this is some sort of vergence or some sort of amplifier for the Force.
Yeah, or maybe this zone here is responsible for unleashing Shin and Balin from the Phantom Zone.
I like the Phantom Menace zone.
The Phantom Menace zone, of course.
Okay, now what happens when we find Thrawn? This is Shin talking to. This is
the magistrate.
Yeah, Elsbeth, Morgan Elsbeth.
Yes, Morgan Elsbeth. And she obviously knows something about the whereabouts of Thrawn, of course, because we saw Ahsoka interrogating her in Season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Yes.
And she wanted info about Thrawn. So Morgan knows something.
Yeah.
So I think some of the events in this show are going to predate Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and then it will move alongside what we saw happening in Season 3.
You know, it may be that attack on that New Republic cruiser is getting this Morgan Elsbeth. Could be a prison break.
Could be, yeah, of course. Maybe then, yeah, so that would place this then after Mandalorian.
Right. Right. Yeah, I will say the biggest question I have after watching this trailer is the timeline. Are we dealing with one timeline, multiple timelines? It's hard to say. And even if you try to go by, we'll see later, Sabine's hair, long hair, short hair, it's still kind of difficult to determine.
So there, she's showing the map to Thrawn, most likely, that holographic map.
When we find Thrawn.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, she's going to point.
So she has
right
the key.
There. Yeah, she knows.
It might be sort of like when R2 provided the second part of the map to Skywalker, that this might be a coming together. Maybe the Balin Skull and Hati, they've got part of the map, and maybe this Elsbeth has another part of the map, but
it's confusing that why would they be trying to contact Thrawn? And that's what makes me think of Heir to the Empire a little bit, is Thrawn had the insane Jedi, Joruus C'baoth, at his disposal. So instead of doing a direct adaptation of the Thrawn trilogy, they're going to have Thrawn incorporate another insane Jedi, and that would be Balin Skull and his apprentice Shin Hati. That's just my guess, but how is that connection made? I don't know. Maybe these two dark Jedi, or whatever we want to call them, were hiding out in the unknown regions and discovered by Thrawn after he got sucked out there via the Purgles.
Right. That's the other question mark, is if Thrawn... Now, the idea of Thrawn coming back, as we learned in Mandalorian Season 3, is something that's not just talked about in hushed tones with Ahsoka and these Jedi, the remnant Imperial warlords. They're all talking about Thrawn's return, and it was Moff Gideon that was trying to fill the vacuum of Thrawn's absence to consolidate power, saying, "But Thrawn hasn't come back. I'm going to take the place of the ultimate warlord."
Yeah, that's why, again, the timeline is fuzzy to us right now, because is this a search for Thrawn while he's still out in the unknown regions? Had he returned by this point? Where's Ezra?
Right. If Thrawn's back, where's Ezra? Exactly. Yeah, we're talking about Star Wars 3, The Search for Thrawn.
Yeah. Power. Such as...
All right. Now okay, so we're seeing that map or whatever she's got is now interfacing with this structure, and it's creating what I think is the world. This is the world between worlds gateway, I believe.
Oh.
That's my thought. That's what
Interesting. It looks to me more like a star map of some sort, but
I'm feeling like
it is surrounding that Stonehenge.
Yeah, that this is sort of like, maybe this is a map of time itself, time and space. Kind of like the Dial of Destiny, actually, in a way.
It's a Dial of Destiny. Continental drift. You didn't think about continental drift, you idiots. We're not going back to 1939, pal.
Hey, you got Lars Mikkelsen, the brother of Mads Mikkelsen in this series. So they're keeping it all in the family. All right.
You've never dreamed.
So I think that's more of this attack on that shuttle. See what we can see here. Got some...
It looks like sort of the Rebel fleet.
Yeah.
Which I guess would be the New Republic fleet, but you see the transports there, and I think that's a Mon Calamari ship. Yes.
Yep. What it looks like
so
to
that's
me.
A cruiser. So, yeah, they're attacking some sort of New Republic fleet.
Yeah.
I've spent most of my life fighting a war.
And we got Hera. Some of this is what we've seen before. Good shot of Mon Mothma. Now, I'm trying to remember. I don't think that we saw Hera in the previous trailers, but I don't think we saw this lockup here of what I'm thinking are the New Republic senators led by Mon Mothma.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a yak, or not yak face, we've got a Reese over here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on with this guy. I mean, boy, I tell you what, he looks like he's hanging with that Jack Black character. Some of these
fancy boys with each other.
So yeah, so these are some unknown characters, but certainly, I think we've got the leader here, Mon Mothma, Genevieve O'Reilly. Once again, boy, she's a busy Star Wars actress, isn't she?
Yeah,
she's in everything.
Good for her. It's amazing and ironic considering her scenes for Revenge of the Sith, which were supposed to be her introduction to Star Wars, were all on the cutting room floor.
Right.
So, justice
she's
has been
definitely
served to her. I think that's very rare in Hollywood, where your role gets cut out of a film and then 20 years later you're reaping the rewards of multiple series based on your character that was cut out of the film that you were originally supposed to be in.
Boy, this looks just like the briefing room on the Mon Cal ship in Return of the Jedi, doesn't it? When they're all gathered around.
Yes. Yeah.
General
probably on a
Madine.
Mon Cal ship. We just saw some in the fleet.
Right.
So this is obviously the war room, very similar to what we see on the Home One in Return of the Jedi, when Madine and Admiral Akbar were giving everybody the deets. And we got Hera.
Yep, Hera approaching as that's Ahsoka coming down the landing platform along with Hu Yang.
There's a cool R2 unit there. There's another one of those Matt Lantern New Republic soldiers.
Hey, it's the Matt Lantern
there.
soldier. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's fake Mace. And who else is there? She's got a cool.
Hey, look, we got a gonk over here.
Bomber jacket. Oh, you got a gonk. There's a gonk in this scene. Boy, this is fun. This is very Star Warsy. And so Ahsoka, she's descending from this ladder.
Right.
Oh, you
These
even
are
have a couple
people in the General
Madine types.
Madines. Yeah, right.
Hey.
They got better hair though than the real General.
Right,
Madine,
right.
but-
You know. Yes. You have a wonderful comb over.
All right, we'll see if we can get some clearer images here.
You and I both know who could help you with this.
So that's a big clue. You and I both know who could help you with this, and then this leads into Sabine. Now, Sabine, now we see, now this is very reminiscent here, this shot of Sabine there on the tower there at Lothal, because this is all part of the big epilogue that you see at the end of, that finishes up the Rebels series. The only difference is, in that epilogue, she has short hair, real short hair, even shorter hair than she had throughout the series. Here we see Sabine in the same spot, seeing what we can assume is Ahsoka's ship flying overhead, but she's got long hair.
Well, a haircut is eminent. This I know. But I'm really amazed at how incredibly accurate this live-action depiction of Lothal is. From Ezra's Tower to the city, because we see the rebuilt city of Lothal only once, and that's in the final moments of the last episode of Rebels, where you see the city is recovered from all the devastation. That Imperial Dome is gone. They blew that thing up in the atmosphere, and the city is back, and the Empire is gone. And this is exactly what it looked like in animation, but now we're seeing it in live action. We see Sabine, she's hanging out in Ezra's Tower, and that's all. It all just ties in perfectly with the end of Rebels. My son asked me, when you hear that heir to the Empire line at the beginning of the trailer,
I started hearing whispers of Thrawn's return as heir to the Empire.
he says, so this is going to be an adaptation of the novels. I said, I don't think so. I think this is more going to be an expansion of Star Wars Rebels. I think this is going to be more about the Rebels story than the Thrawn trilogy.
You know, this idea, Jim, of doing loose adaptations of expanded universe stories, you know, as I have been dabbling a little bit more into some of the current Trek, Picard really sort of drew me in, and I've been watching Strange New Worlds and listening here and there to, I mean, nobody quite does Star Trek the way we do Star Wars here at Rebel Force Radio, but I try to dabble in and listen to some people talking Trek, people that know more than I do. And I am struck by how many plot threads throughout shows like Discovery and now Strange New Worlds some of these Trek pundits are being pulled out of existing tie-in material throughout the years of Star Trek. So it's happening in Trek where they're not doing direct adaptations, but they're borrowing concepts and ideas. And you could make an argument. We know that George himself would borrow characters or designs from the expanded universe. So why not borrow? I know it's sacred to a lot of people, that Thrawn trilogy, but in this case, borrow the aspects of those stories that they need to tell this story. They obviously work. They've garnered a lot of dedication and loyalty and love throughout fandom for the last however many years. So I kind of look at it and go, yeah, I think it's fair. I don't think it has to be an exact depiction of Heir to the Empire. I think it's fair that those concepts could be plucked based on the needs that they have for this story.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what they're going to be doing with it. I mean, the books were all inspired by the live action, so why not just turn the tables? And
that's a great point. Yeah, right. I mean, let's face it, right. The books only exist because of the Star Wars franchise. So now the Star Wars franchise wants to come back and take a little bit, wet its beak from the books. Why not?
And in a way, it legitimizes those old stories, And in another way, it changes them, sure, and makes them something they weren't necessarily meant to be in the first place. But it provides new life to the characters and situations from those books. So I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
She's still just as
So let's see what's going on here. She's got the long hair. She's got the short hair. There's that highway that leads in and out of the Lothal city that we saw in the very first episode of Rebels.
Yeah, this goes
Jason,
so...
you and me.
Yeah.
Sitting in I remember we were sitting in a screening room at Lucasfilm watching that first episode of Rebels like a month or two before anyone even saw it. And that was cool. And I just, I flash back to that moment as I'm seeing the live action version of Lothal. It just takes me back.
Oh, yeah. That was really something else to be among the very first to see a brand new Star Wars series. That was very special. So Sabine, with the long hair. So again, that's why the timeline has kind of thrown me, because, we have certain events that we know have to happen. We know that Ezra and Thrawn are lost at some point. We know that Ahsoka returns from the world between worlds. We know that she has short hair. She never really has long hair. This hair is way longer than she ever had in the animated series. So I wonder if this is the Rebels, for lack of a better term, this is the Rebels look for Sabine. So when we see Sabine with this longer hair, this is to represent her in the proper Rebels timeline. So we could be looking at a live action retelling or an expanded retelling of the reunion between Ahsoka and Sabine, like we saw in that epilogue, potentially.
Well, I don't see it that way. I think this long hair is more to signify that time has separated the end of the Rebels series and the beginning of this timeline, which is at least 5 years after Return of the Jedi. And we get a little taste of this in that epilogue, in the final episode of Rebels, when they show Ahsoka and Sabine in that era. That's clearly after the Empire had been defeated. So I think that's where you're going to see the crossover for sure. And as Sabine gets reunited with Ahsoka, before they decide to leave together, then she's going to cut off her hair. and be like, okay, well, the old Sabine's back then, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got short hair Sabine.
Yes.
As we see at the end of Rebels, she goes off with Ahsoka and trains. They have some sort of falling out, or Ahsoka abandons her, leaves Sabine.
Yeah, we
then
don't know what
Sabine-
that's all about.
Well, we don't know what that's about, but Sabine then goes back to Lothal and hangs
Maybe
out
she
on the
never
tower.
left.
Well, I think she
goes
leaves
back
with
there, yeah.
Ahsoka.
She's definitely there by the that epilogue in Rebels. She's
Right.
definitely there. And then she gets reunited with Ahsoka. But a significant amount of time has passed.
Since
And
that
Ahsoka says it
reunion.
in this trailer. No, not since that reunion. Since whatever happened. Okay.
I'm glad you're struggling a little bit too.
Ahsoka gets pulled out of the world between worlds,
Yes.
and then she's back in the time there, the timeline just prior to the events of A New Hope. Ahsoka has nothing to do with defeating the Empire on Lothal. She's not there for any of that.
Right.
After those events, she and Sabine somehow have a falling out. And Ahsoka says she walks away from Sabine. She says it in this trailer.
Yes, right.
And so I guess Ahsoka kept walking after she walked away from Sabine because we don't see her at all in the original trilogy.
Right.
So when Ahsoka walked away from Sabine, she not only walked away from Sabine, she walked away apparently from everything because she's not around during the time of the original trilogy. Wouldn't she have offered her services somehow, some way?
But
especially after hearing the son of Anakin destroyed the Death Star, that had to have come across her desk at some point in time. So where's Ahsoka? She's split.
All right, but this shot right here, this is a recreation of the epilogue.
Yes.
Okay?
Right.
And what do we got? We got long hair Sabine.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's true. But we also see her cutting her hair later in this trailer.
We do. But what I'm positing is this a live action remake of what we see in the epilogue?
I believe it is.
Okay, so the long hair is it's a compromise. She doesn't look exactly like she did in the animation, but it's still Sabine, and it's still that this particular moment.
Yeah. Or maybe it's a different moment. She's just seeing Ahsoka's ship fly. Like a week later, she's seeing Ahsoka's back.
Right, she's back.
So I mean, I don't know how all of that works.
I'm just looking for clues,
She's still just as stubborn
Right,
as
can't.
ever.
I bet you were master.
Just as stubborn as ever. Hera is saying, or no, that's Ahsoka, I believe. That's
Ahsoka saying that.
Yeah,
and of course,
Hera's
that's a
saying-
hallmark of the character of Sabine is her stubbornness.
Yeah,
it borderlines on obnoxious and annoying from time to time for me as a fan.
it did in the series. That's for sure.
It did in the
Rebels.
series. And I'm fingers crossed for the best here in the show where they'll actually treat her more as an adult. I hope we see some maturity where she's just not bitching and moaning. I don't need Star Wars Karen all the time, okay? And that's kind of the vibe I was getting from Sabine. It's like, stop complaining all the time.
Sabine needs to talk to the manager. All right.
Found you difficult at times.
Anakin never got to finish my training.
Okay, so here we can see the hologram image. So this, they're using a little trailer trickery as they do. So they're splicing part of one conversation and making it look like it's all part of the same. But this is a hologram conversation between Ahsoka and Hera. And Hera is obviously trying to persuade Ahsoka to reach out to Sabine for help because Thrawn is returning or has returned by this point. And she's throwing out, saying, "Hey, your master, I'm sure, was, or you were a pain in the ass to your master. You were a tough apprentice," which is the first time that we get real confirmation that Sabine at one time was Ahsoka's apprentice. So what does that mean? Apprentice of what? Was she Was she force sensitive? Was she just training her to use a lightsaber? Was she just training her to be a spy, a rogue? What apprentice and master? And we'll hear.
Do they say
in just
that?
a moment.
They say that specifically? That she was an apprentice? They say that? Or she just trained with Ahsoka?
She calls her master. Sabine calls her master.
Well, I mean,
this.
everyone, master Jedi, whatever. 3PO called Luke master. So.
Okay. You're not wrong there. You're not wrong there. But let's listen to this Hera dialogue.
Your master found you difficult at times.
Anakin never got to finish my training. I walked away from him, just like I walked away from Sabine.
She says, I bet your master found you difficult at times.
Yeah.
My master didn't get to finish my training. She's putting herself in parity with, she's drawing a comparison between herself and Sabine with Anakin and Ahsoka. So it's starting to feel to me like Sabine is an apprentice of some sort.
Later in the trailer, though, they do reveal, like one of the characters, I think it's Shin, says, you have no power,
Right. You have no power. So was this some sort of
situation where just
experiment?
trained? It could just be a situation, trained in combat roles, much like how Dooku trained General Grievous in lightsaber combat. Could be something similar to that.
Could be. Let's jump back.
And we know that Sabine will be wielding a green lightsaber at some point in this series, and that she's also trained with the darksaber. So
right.
she has skills, at least fencing with a saber.
And we saw John Boyega's Finn showing some skill with a lightsaber, and jury's still out on whether.
But he is force sensitive.
I guess. I lost track.
He is.
There's a little showdown between Ahsoka and Sabine. Her saying,
"You never made things easy for me."
You never made things easy for me. So they're a little icy between the two, I believe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, without question, there's friction. That's Ahsoka walked away from her.
Master.
Did you see
now
that droid?
that was.
Did you see that droid?
I did see the droid. The droid is great. Great little homage to the original R2 Kenner figure. I love it.
Which I
love
have
it.
right here.
Which Jimmy Mack is demonstrating right here.
See, he's got the big eye, the big round eye, and he's got those little jobbers on the side.
Filoni loves throwing in the Kenner references. He's the one that gave us the Greedo with the Kenner colors, the Hammerhead with the Kenner colors in the Clone Wars. It's great.
Walrus Man,
yeah.
Master.
As a Jedi, sometimes you have to make...
Boy, does he sound like Hayden Christensen there? I mean, I know it's not.
He does a little bit,
but he's like,
sure.
As a Jedi.
Absolutely.
He's got that dry Hayden delivery here. Listen to this.
As a Jedi, sometimes you have to make the decision no one else can. But I'm counting on you to see this through.
Oh, here's the big dramatic haircut.
Nice haircut.
Ready to go. Sabine is back.
Yeah, so Sabine, all right, so that's the return to her in her proper Sabine form. So she can get that helmet on, cuts the hair.
Mm-hmm. So the hair will be symbolic of her reclaiming her past intensity,
Sabine-ness.
or just to represent, hey, look here, Sabine is back. It's kind of like when Indiana Jones puts the hat on,
right?
That
she cuts the hair.
He's not dumping bourbon into his morning coffee anymore. He's going out for an adventure.
All right, August 23rd.
Sometimes we have to do.
Looks like those are training droids, aren't they? Or
I think those are the droids that we also see in Mandalorian Season 2, in Chapter 13, The Jedi, which features Ahsoka. And they are the magistrates.
Oh, that's right.
Protection.
Yes.
So
the magistrates droids.
Those specific droids. I think they're called HK droids or something like that. I'm not 100%
Sometimes
sure.
we have to do what's right, regardless of our personal feelings.
You see live action depiction of the mural that we see at the end of Star Wars Rebels, featuring the Ghost crew, Kanan, Ezra, Hera, Sabine, Lothcat, the whole gang. And so, I mean, we see that in the very last episode of Rebels as well. So there's definitely crossover with that epilogue in that last episode. Big crossover there.
Oh, yeah. And it is likely if this trailer follows suit to the rest of the Disney Plus trailers over the years, we're probably looking at all of this happening in the first couple of episodes. I would be a bit surprised. So,
no, me neither. Me neither.
Buckle up.
It looked like some sort of creature there, didn't it?
Buckle up.
Right, but hold on. Where's that? Is that? Oh, that's a Purrgil, I think.
Oh, Purrgil. Yeah, okay.
I think that's a Purrgil. Yeah.
Now, again, I think the events in this are going to be happening at the same time as Mandalorian Season 3. So when we get that glimpse of Grogu spotting the Purrgils, that could be a situation where he's actually seeing in real time this scene right here that we're looking at.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So on the other end of this hyperspace lane is the Naboo starfighter with Din Djarin and Grogu.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool idea. Very cool.
Buckle up.
If we don't stop Thrawn, everything will be...
Now, there's our first legit shot here of Lars Mikkelsen. We saw kind of a bootleg version of this, but this is the first real official shot of Lars as Grand Admiral Thrawn.
For sure. He looks like Data. I'm sorry. He looks like Mr. Data from Star Trek. Come on, don't you see that?
Oh, absolutely I see it. As a matter of fact, the first Data action figure going back to 1988 from Galoob, they released it with a blue face. And so there's actually a blue-faced variant of Data before they then repurposed with sort of that sort of cream color or tan face that he ends up having. But yeah, there is a blue-faced Data action figure from 88, and it looks just like this.
Just
sans
like
the red
that,
eyes.
I can imagine. Give him red eyes, and you got yourself a Thrawn figure. But he really does. He does. Like, Thrawn just had a different vibe to me.
Yeah.
To me, he felt like a bigger guy, like a tall guy.
I have no idea how big Lars is.
I don't either. They don't make him look tall there, though.
You're not feeling a presence, like a weighty presence with this version of Thrawn?
I'm not. It's like more like a military guy sort of vibe was what I always got off of Thrawn. But they love that Lars Mikkelsen take on the character. And they just had to make sure that the same voice actor played Thrawn in this.
Yeah.
And so I wonder why they're so, yes to these actors and no to these actors when it comes to recreating your voice roles. I don't get it. I don't get it. So
yeah.
I just always pictured, Lars is 6'4", so he's no little guy.
But you're right, the way this is framed and shot, it doesn't. He doesn't have a hulking appearance.
No. But, let's just wait and see. I don't want to jump to conclusions based on this little brief glimpse we're getting of the character, probably in a very specific moment that he's reacting to. It's hard to sum up what the character's going to be like from this. Guy's 6'4". I mean, who am I to talk? He's 3 inches taller than me. He doesn't have a commanding physical presence. It's like... Shut up,
we're
bug.
just dealing with the images that are in front of us, folks, That's what we're doing.
Yeah, first blush,
Right.
You have no power.
You have no power here. You were just referring to that scene.
Yeah, Shin calling out Sabine, for sure. But we're getting a lot more Sabine out of this trailer than we are Ahsoka herself, I think.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. Sabine.
I'm just getting more Sabine out of this.
and Hati. It's like, well, whose journey is this? The show is called Ahsoka, just like it was Mandalorian season 3, and whose story was it really in season 3? Good question. Maybe they just feel that it's important to telegraph to the fans that there's lots of Rebels goodness in this series. So even if you're not a Clone Wars Ahsoka nut and you love your Rebels, this is a show that you're going to want to tune into. So I think maybe this trailer is appealing to that group, but I'm with you. We're spending a lot of time with Sabine here.
Anakin spoke highly of you.
All right, now here,
So
okay.
there's the connection.
Yes, yeah, right. Anakin spoke.
What did he say? We're both like, hold the phone.
Anakin spoke highly of you. So Anakin and Baylan Skoll knew one another. But here's that same setting, Jim, that we were talking about earlier. This sort of what did we call it? It was like
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge of the Jedi, and we just saw Baylan there with Hati and Morgan Elsbeth. They were looking at the map, and now all of a sudden Ahsoka's there. So, if this this likely happens fairly soon after the events what we saw earlier in this same setting. So maybe Ahsoka's hanging out there waiting. Yeah,
setting up a showdown. So if this is just from the first few episodes, we're going to be in for a wild ride with this series. There's so much happening.
Doubt.
The special effects are amazing. The starships.
Once a rebel, always a rebel.
There's Hu Wang, voiced by David Tennant.
Hu Yang.
Hu Wang, ancient Jedi droid that assists younglings with the construction of their lightsabers. So we saw him in Clone Wars.
Oh, there's an Inquisitor with the fan blade.
What are the odds under that Inquisitor mask you find Ezra Bridger?
Oh.
Chew on that for a while.
Oh.
We got till August 23rd.
I thought you were going to say Reva.
Well, I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds? But she clearly left the life of the Inquisitors.
Yeah.
By the end of the Kenobi series. Here we have the saber spinning around like a helicopter blade, which is what we saw from the Grand Inquisitor a bunch of times in the Kenobi series. Just ask Flea. He'll tell you about it. So there's a lot to look forward to. I think this series is going to throw a lot at us, and I think it's gonna come out of the gate hot.
Yeah,
and that's what I hope to see. Much like the Mandalorian season 1 did, where things get established right away. We don't dilly-dally around with too much deep exposition and people standing around talking about things, and it gets right into the action. And from what I see from that trailer, there's going to be a lot of action in this series.
Very much so. Yeah, I keep going back thinking about the relationship between Sabine and Ahsoka in this show. You've got names being bandied about like Master, allusions to Ahsoka's relationship with Anakin being comparable to her relationship with Sabine, and all these events that we these beats that we know have to happen. Like we talked about Ahsoka coming back, Ezra and Thrawn disappearing, some sort of, well, then Ahsoka approaching Sabine, like we see in the epilogue after the Battle of Endor. We know that takes place after the Empire is overthrown. She reappears to Sabine on Lothal. Supposedly that's then when she takes, it could be that everyone's celebrating the Emperor's demise, the end of Imperial rule, but something through the Force tells Ahsoka that the evil is not extinguished yet, that there's still an evil out there. She knows that Thrawn's still out there and that he could potentially consolidate power. So she's going to do what she can by enlisting someone like Sabine, just throwing things out there. So they meet in that hangar there in Lothal. And then we've got...
Maybe you're absolutely correct. And maybe not.
Maybe not.
People will let us know.
They will. Hey, one more thing about Ahsoka, and this is maybe no small thing, but if you're a fan of collecting Lego, there was an announcement of a new Lego set. This is the Lego Ghost and Phantom 2. This comes out September 1st, but it's all over the Lego website. And so they're not really doing anything to hide it. But what makes it interesting is that they show these minifigs that come with it. And these minifigs, you get Hera. You get other characters here. You get Beta. You get First Officer Hawkins. So I'm thinking this fella on the left is First Officer Hawkins. He's wearing that General Madine outfit. Beta, I'm thinking, is the Mon Cal.
I heard the Mon Cal was named Quarry, sort of as a tribute to Ralph McQuarrie. But
Beta, like Beta Fish.
Oh, right. Like a beta. Okay. It's always with the fishes, with these Mon Cals.
And then you got, obviously, Hera. Well, who's this guy right here? That is Jason Syndulla, which is very interesting. And then, of course, Chopper. But Jason Syndulla, he's not talked about in the trailer, and any of the trailers that we've seen or any of the press that we've read about the series. So it's a bit of a surprise. Now, the last time we saw Jason, he looked like this.
Yeah, green hair.
With the
big
green
ears.
hair. And
blue
the
eyes.
elf-like ears. So they're obviously taking some liberties, and I, for one, am glad they are. Our pal Kyle Newman said that he looks like a Munchie-Chi. So if you're a kid of the 80s, you know what he's talking about, those little monkey figures that were all the rage back then. But this is him now. So he's obviously not going to have it doesn't look like he's going to have much of an exotic look, that he'll be, more along the lines of a regular looking human. He didn't carry this version of Jason Syndulla doesn't indicate that he has any of that, anything from his mom. He's, he doesn't have the leku.
Right. Well, I mean, and that was the importance of the green hair as a storytelling device in that final episode of Rebels, because that's the only time we ever see this kid. And he gets introduced to us without any sort of dialogue or any sort of setup or anything. But the green hair sitting next to the green mom, you put two and two together really quick, and you go, hey, that's Kanan and Hera's son. Jason. And the green hair itself is what really, that's the slam dunk that lets you know that that's exactly who you're looking at. I didn't know. Did he have a name? Did they named him Jason in the show?
They name drop him Jason in the epilogue. Yes.
Okay. All right. That part I didn't recall.
Yeah.
But so now he has the brown hair, and that just probably looks better on camera and everything, as opposed to having a green-haired kid running around. And, if the kid's even slightly annoying, the green hair would make him 1,000 times more annoying. We all this. And also he's older. Well, maybe. It's hard to tell when that epilogue in Rebels really happens. But it almost makes it feel like it happens in the same era as this show. So this is clearly an aesthetic and artistic choice. And it just goes to show you, between his hairstyle and Sabine's hairstyle, don't look for continuity when it comes to the hair.
Right. Yes. I learned that
Just forget
tonight.
it. Yeah, just throw that out the window. We used to complain in the early days of Clone Wars that the hair didn't move. And it seemed like it was like a big wooden block on their heads.
Yeah.
And it didn't move, and that took away from the faster, more intense vibe of Star Wars. And so the guys who work on Clone Wars actually had open ears to us and heard us saying this, and they started to make the hair move more often.
You can't be fast. You can't be fast and intense with no hair movement.
Right.
Doesn't work.
Right. So they get very flexible when it comes to hairstyles in Star Wars. And we'll be seeing flexible hair in the Ahsoka show, too.
Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
James Mangold, the director of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, also on deck for a new Star Wars movie. And James Mangold was on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast with, was that Josh Horowitz? Is that the fella that does that there podcast? We've got some audio highlights, courtesy of one Jimmy Mack.
Yes, indeedy. So, James talked to Josh on Happy, Sad, Confused. And obviously, the topic of conversation primarily was Dial of Destiny, but they also talked about Mangold's Swamp Thing project. They also talked about Mangold's Bob Dylan film that's going to star Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan. And they talked about the Dawn of the Jedi project that he is going to be working for Lucasfilm on. And
now, that's not an official title, Dawn of the Jedi. That's
it's the name of the era.
Right.
They specifically laid out Dawn of the Jedi is the name of this era. And James Mangold talks about where this era specifically falls on the Star Wars timeline.
When I talked to some of the Star Wars clerics who keep track of all these timelines, I was like, so when would this have happened? And they were like 25,000 years before Episode 1. And I was like, oh, I was looking for some distance, but that's distance.
Yeah, okay. I think I've got a nice, clean, fresh palette to work from, gang.
Exactly.
Thank you. 25,000 years.
Yes.
That's enough.
And that's what he wanted.
Right.
He wanted to tell a story in an unfettered kind of way. He's not the type of filmmaker that really wants to become part of a franchise. He will deliver you an episode or a chapter of your franchise, but he's not going to make it his full-time gig. And so that's why he likes to do this era of Star Wars. Why he's approaching this era of Star Wars is because there are no restraints. He's not boxed in. Anywhere else in the timeline, he feels boxed in. And look at the Indiana Jones film. He's telling the final chapter of the story, which presents a lot of blue sky opportunity because you don't have to worry about setting things up for the future. That's not the type of filmmaker James Mangold is. He doesn't want to apply himself to franchises in that way, yet he will contribute to a franchise in a limited fashion as far as like one movie goes.
You know, he had a really great quote in this Variety article where he was talking about, because, you know, he directed the Old Man Wolverine movie. What was that, Logan?
Yeah,
I think
Logan.
It was called
right.
Logan. And famously, Hugh Jackman said that was it for him. He was hanging up the claws and the adamantium for good. He was out. But the lure of this Deadpool movie and getting those two characters on the screen, and of course he and Ryan Reynolds sort of had this fun real life social media war back and forth, and it was inevitable. So in this Variety art interview, and we'll get to the interview clip there, Jim, that you're setting up next, but I just thought it was interesting the way he said, he goes, I can't say that there's a part of me that doesn't wish that we'd let it be. He's talking about just finish the Wolverine story with Logan. He goes, but there was always going to be another Wolverine. There could be a baby Wolverine and a cartoon Wolverine. As much liquid as they can squeeze out of that rag, they're going to try to do. I don't measure my success on a movie like Logan with whether we ended the conversation. I ended my conversation. So exactly what you said. He will go into these franchises, but he's not there to carry the water for anybody else. He's not there to make sure that there's continuity connecting to the next thing. He's going to tell his story, come in and tap out. And I respect the fact that he's very upfront about that, and that's what he's comfortable with as a filmmaker.
Right. And yeah, he just wants those opportunities where he's not boxed in as a storyteller. And, 25,000 years prior to the events of Star Wars, that's a lot of time to deal with. And, it goes so far back into the future. It's like the Jedi are just discovering the Force, and I mean they're just discovering Jedi, really.
Right.
They don't, are they going to be calling themselves Jedi at this point in the timeline? Mangold talks about that.
I don't want to make any guarantees one way or another, but it would be before Jedi, meaning you might be experiencing something that might become Jedi. But despite the fact other people make movies other ways, I don't tend to think people brand themselves before they've actually found themselves. So you don't come up a name for your organization, because I tend to think that the branding tends to happen later.
He's absolutely right, and he has made comparisons to this concept. Can't call it a film yet, but this concept that he's playing with the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, as we know, is the foundation of the Judeo-Christian faith. They weren't running around calling themselves Christians, or they weren't, organized in any way. It was the discovery of the God that would then consolidate religion for most of the planet thereafter. So I can definitely see that metaphor working here in the way he's laying this out.
Right. The only thing I could think of that would make it different would be if the Jedi existed as some sort of organization, maybe a religious organization or something, prior to the discovery of the Force, and they're the ones who discover the Force.
Ah, okay.
And that changes everything for them. I mean, really, isn't that what most people who go on, on religious quests or people who devote themselves to their faith, aren't they always in hopes of some big revelation, some big enlightenment, something that lifts them up to a higher plane of existence? People meditate with that kind of thought in mind about dipping into the consciousness and everything.
Right.
So for the Jedi then to discover that level of the Force, then to really validate their faith.
Something I think that we're go ahead.
Well, it's almost as if, applying yourself to, I'll just say, being a Christian, because that's what I am. It's like, boy, it would be pretty cool to walk on water someday. I really have the faith that JC himself did that. And then all of a sudden, one day you can do it. And that would be like, oh my God, wouldn't your faith be completely validated at that point? You'll be like, okay, I'm all in now.
But
because faith very rarely reveals a truth to you in that kind of concrete way that you can see.
Yes, but here's the rub. What you're describing is taking an ordinary person and them applying an understanding to the world that elevates them and manifests as supernatural powers. What George has shown us since the prequels is that there has to be something in the blood. So these early Jedi would, in some ways, have to be something more akin, going back to, Wolverine, going back to Professor Xavier's gifted students. So, I mean, this would have to be people or beings that have these latent and innate gifts and qualities, as opposed to somebody discovering something external and then believing in it and then elevating themselves up.
Yeah, I mean, how far is Mangold going to go with an idea like midi-chlorians?
Right.
How far is he going to go with something like that? Or is it just a case of where it all just happens in a supernatural kind of way that can't be explained? And they are thousands of years from the medical to where they have the medical technology where they can actually discover midi-chlorians.
Oh, that's a good point too. This could obviously predate their ability to even be able to scientifically explain the phenomenon that they're seeing. Yeah.
Right. Cavemen discovered fire, but they didn't know the elements that created fire or constructed fire. To them, it was all mystical and magical.
Right.
So tapping into the Force might be something very similar until it gets studied enough to where these guys realize, oh my God, look at these little buggers running around in the bloodstream. Holy smokes. So if it, breaks down to something that, well, we know it breaks down to something that simple because Qui-Gon does a test on Anakin and he can clearly see the midichlorian count in his bloodstream. So somebody's going to have to discover that. I wonder if that's going to be in the movie. First half, a guy learns how to make a rock float. Second half of the film, he's looking in a microscope the whole time.
There's a blockbuster if I ever heard one.
Yeah. It ends. He pulls his head up off of the viewport in the microscope and he goes, Eureka! And then roll credits.
You remember when people thought that George's original treatments to episodes 7, 8, and 9 was going to be like some sort of weird, like microscopic battle of amoebas and...
It could have been interesting. Hey, why not?
I think it was a misinterpretation of what George was saying, in my opinion. But yeah, it's going to be. I think
it was going to be more of a study of the relationship between a Jedi Force user and the midichlorians themselves,
right?
And maybe further discovery happens along the way, as opposed to looking through a microscope and seeing a show. Going on. Look what's going on here, Civil War. Right on that slide. All right, so Mangold, this is interesting stuff because we had heard about a Boba Fett film that was being developed for Lucasfilm. That thing got scrapped at some point after the Solo film failed at the box office. James Mangold's name was attached to that. And I believe some of the trades reported that at the time. Hollywood Reporter, maybe. And so Mangold talks about it, totally legit. And he was looking to put maybe more of an edge, a more mature edge on Star Wars storytelling.
At the point I was doing it, I was probably scaring the shit out of everyone, but I was probably making much more of a borderline rated R kind of spaghetti western, single planet, the spaghetti western. The world would never be able to embrace Baby Yoda if I had made that. So because it didn't really belong in the world I was kind of envisioning, but it kind of just in a moment of kind of corporate realignment after whatever happened with the Han Solo movie, they just suddenly decided they weren't making pictures like that, and I think the opportunities in streaming presented themselves. It was a beautiful period. I was just listening to Ennio Morricone all day, all night, and typing away. But the I'm not sure it ever would have happened. I'm not sure that it was in anyone's plans what I was thinking about.
So it almost seemed like he didn't want to make a Star Wars film. they told him to go do his work.
It sounds like he was having fun, sitting there spinning the scores of the old Leone spaghetti westerns. Mm-hmm. But we do know, too, Jim, that there was a period of time soon after the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm where they were just soliciting ideas from as many people as possible. They wanted to get a lot of stuff, and we saw Rogue One, coming out of ILM as one idea, and so there was sort of like the Wild West. They just wanted a lot of different creative people thinking about what they would do in the Star Wars universe, and I think this was Mangold's contribution, this idea of Boba Fett.
Was it he who generated this pitch, or was it Lucasfilm who said, hey, we'd like you to maybe play around with this? It's hard to say because I think Josh Trank was attached to the Boba Fett film first, and then that blew up. And then a couple years later, the Solo film came out, and that blew up all the film projects that were currently being worked on at the time. So they must have brought in James after they gave Trank his walking papers and said, hey, do what you can do with this.
Yeah.
And so he gave it a shot. I think for a year he was working on that. It's a long time. But it just didn't happen. He's like, hey, say la vie. That's the business. But they brought him back, and here he is. He's going to work. He worked on Indiana Jones. Now he's going to be doing this Dawn of the Jedi thing. And it might have been an incredible Boba Fett film, and it might have been a complete disaster. Who knows how that would have gone over. But I think people would have enjoyed seeing maybe a tougher, harsher, grittier Boba Fett than what was delivered by 60-year-old Tim Morrison in the streaming series.
Sounds like Tim himself, by comments he's made, would have maybe enjoyed a grittier version of Boba Fett.
True.
True. I'm going to share just a couple of quick quotes from this story I've been talking a little bit about here from Variety. Indiana Jones 5 director James Mangold on pinch hitting for Spielberg. And sorry. I couldn't see, it was all blacked out. And refusing fan service. Franchises have become a large scale form of advertising. So the first question that he answers about this idea of sort of franchise entertainment and this sort of thing is when they asked him about, in this piece, they asked him about, would you carry on the Indiana Jones franchise through Phoebe Waller-Bridge? And as I was saying earlier, he says, I'm just not interested. I refuse. I can't do it. The amount of lore and Easter eggs and fan service starts to become antithetical to any of this stuff at a certain point. It's not storytelling anymore. It becomes large-scale advertising. And, Jim, you and I have talked about this subject of fan service, and you and I are actually, in a lot of ways, fans of fan service because we think that these films are there to actually serve the fans. But I think what he's talking about there is when a series becomes, and we've used this expression before, self-aware, when it starts to become so aware of itself and of its own universe and its own place in the universe that it starts to feel very inauthentic and like it's there just to sort of promote itself. It's weird. It's very meta. It's like a snake eating its own tail. It's there just for the sake of promoting itself. And he's just not interested in that. He's not interested in that. And I think it's relevant to this discussion and also for those conspiracy theorists out there that have made the claim that this whole Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny was designed and created just to turn Indiana Jones into Phoebe Waller-Bridge, essentially. And
there's always that element of the fan base where they're going to think that. And why do they think that? The whole passing the baton thing maybe have been driven into the ground a little too much.
Yeah, they certainly have justification. This is the other thing that bothers me is that there's also an unwillingness by some people to not understand why some fans have this cynical attitude. Well, I went into Indiana Jones with as clean a slate or clean of thoughts as I possibly could. But some of them went in there with their cynicism. Well, where does that cynicism come from? It comes from being disappointed one too many times. And these creatives know what they're doing. They know that they have done the old bait and switch before with some of these classic characters. So I'm not saying that these people don't have reason to be suspicious. My problem is when they make up their minds completely and then try to discourage other people from even seeing it. They're not even willing to give it a shot. So that's where my issue is. But I'm certainly not saying that they don't have reason to think the worst.
Well, I think that over the last 5 years or so, there's been a developing lack of confidence in Lucasfilm and Disney for that matter. And there's also a lot of things swirling around in the atmosphere that weren't there 5 years ago that are all of a sudden there now regarding Lucasfilm and Disney. And that continues to hurt fan confidence as well. There was a time when we thought that a lot of critics were shilling for the Disney company, so they would have access, and they would have access to the premieres, access to interviews and exclusives, and cover stories and things like that. Well, I think that idea has sort of lost its sheen at this point. I've noticed a backlash by a lot of the big trades and other movie publications that appear to be anti-Disney backlash. So there's a bunch of things you can look at where you say, well, it might be stemming from this, it might be stemming from that. But here, I mean, I'm just focused on the product itself as a Star Wars fan, as a Lucasfilm fan, and Indiana Jones fan, and I see where some of that lack of confidence is coming from. But it's not just regulated to Disney and Lucasfilm. It's Hollywood wide with a lot of tentpoles and franchises. Do I need to point further than the Flash movie? I don't think so. It's gotten to the point where maybe too many tentpoles is not a good thing, and too much of one particular franchise over the course of a year is not that much of a good thing, and people are starting to get burned out. So.
Well, they can't all be blockbusters. And if everything is special, then nothing is special anymore.
Right.
And it seems like
what happened
everything
to a good old bomb, we used to go to theaters to see the bombs just to have a good time.
It seems like Disney, between their Marvel films, their Lucasfilm films, their Pixar films, their Disney animation films, they expect every one of their releases to be a huge blockbuster.
Yes.
And as you were saying, I just don't know that the market can necessarily afford to make every movie $1 billion movie.
Right.
It's just not realistic.
It never worked that way.
No.
It never worked that way.
You'd get one or two a year that would be huge money.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of them were all just sort of there.
And the reason you only got one or two a year from each studio would be because they were unwilling to open up the money vaults to fund these giant things. I don't know when the shift happened where it went from only certain movies should be budgeted at such an extreme to every movie needs to be budgeted to such an extreme. And that's what I'm seeing. And there is a backlash from that. There's this horror film Insidious, which was made for like a tenth of what the Indiana Jones film was made for. And it beat Indiana Jones in its first weekend of release, which is the second weekend for Indiana Jones. That's very interesting.
It is. I think
see
they're
smaller budgeted features.
Price tag on Indiana Jones is up there in the $300 million mark. The cost to make that movie. Yeah.
At best, by the time this podcast is coming. Oh, you mean the
cost? Yeah, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, I think the box office is about $250 million worldwide, which is, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's not paying for Indiana Jones.
No.
The good thing about something like with these franchises, though, is it does have interesting back end money in the form of memorabilia, toys, merchandise, etc. So money can be made in those avenues. But at the end of the day, I mean, the only reason I consider it is because I worry that it's going to affect the sustainability of future tentpole projects. Hollywood has knee-jerk reactions, so they see that they're losing money with these $300 million films. What are they going to do? They're going to stop making $300 million films.
Yeah.
And then what's that going to leave us with?
Well, the question I have is, why do these movies cost what they do? How have the budgets gotten so out of whack? And I don't know enough about the business to say, but I just wonder, and I see it in the Broadway industry as well, where nobody wants to take much of a leap and do new stories and creating new characters and new mythologies. They want to do everything on the backs of these established brands and franchises, but to play in that world and play that game, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'm at a loss as to why the costs have gotten so outrageous, but who knows? Show at rebelforceradio.com if you have some ideas. We have some friends in the industry. Maybe they can set us straight on that. But we're running a bit long here. Let's run in and let's check out what's going on in Star Wars. You don't want to do Star Wars and pop culture now?
Culture.
Okay.
I want to drop it. I feel
right,
like
we're dropping
too long.
Okay. Okay. We want to do our world premiere.
Our box office talk, and now we need Puppet Lando. You want to talk about budgets exploding? You have no idea how many money trunks we have to drive up to Puppet Lando's estate to get him out of there and into the recording studio. But I got good news for you. It's happened. We just got news from Puppet Lando's producer, Jeff Ulisny, who also serves as the conductor of the Rebel Force Radio Orchestra.
I didn't even know we had an orchestra. That's amazing.
Yeah, we got,
incredible.
Puppet Lando does.
Right.
We don't have access to it. And Puppet Lando's allowed to use the name Rebel Force Radio without even asking.
Wow.
Because he's got that kind of clout. But Jeff Ulisny's the conductor of the orchestra, and this time around, we have some guest musicians sitting in. RFR VIP, Patreon guys know him. Joe Dallas. Joe Dallas is sitting in. He's a professional musician from the Florida Keys. He's playing bass and trombone on this track. We have another Star Wars superfan, loyal RFR listener, Ben Roloff, who is playing drums on this track. And, of course, Puppet Lando handling the lead vocal duties. So without further ado, I'd like to bring him up on the stage now, ladies and gentlemen. Please, everyone, turn off your cell phones and let's keep it quiet around here, because things are going to get pretty chill as Puppet Lando takes the stage. Puppet!
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lando Calrissian. I'm the administrator of this facility. I bet a lot of you look at a guy like me and think, now, there's somebody who has it all together. I bet nothing goes wrong for him. And for the most part, you'd be right. But every once in a while, things go sideways, even for old Puppet Lando. And when that happens, there's only one thing you can say about it. Hit it, boys. Once I had it all, a city in the clouds, a responsible leader in his prime. And then along came Lord Vader. I guess I'll see you later. This deal keeps getting worse all the time. Once I had this droid, she served at my side, the greatest navigator you can find. We made the Kessel Run, but that ended all our fun. This deal keeps getting worse all the time. Sometimes when I smile, I do so just for style. A mask to hide the pain I feel inside. I put on a show so no one else can know the arrows that have wounded my pride. Joe Dallas. No, that ain't Lobot. Everybody knows that life has highs and lows. One day you're on top of the game. Next day trouble hits and you're down in the pits. And life can never be quite the same. Once I had a ship, the fastest one around, with a closet full of capes, so refined. Then I lost a hand to Solo, and then I had to let go. This deal keeps getting worse all the time.
Pregnant pause there.
Yeah, well, that was pregnant.
Supply problems of every kind, and I've had labor difficulties. It's not my fault.
Wow. Holy smokes.
Incredible.
Brilliant. That was great.
Love. Oh, for Puppet Lando. Amazing. That was the world premiere of this deal. Keeps getting worse all the time. Huge props to Jeff Ulickney and Joe Dallas, Ben Roloff, and of course, the voice, the man, the myth, the legend, the felt, Puppet Lando. Where do we go from here? There's nowhere to go from here.
No, there's nowhere to go. Not after we hear from the softest felt and the smoothest voice around, Puppet Lando. You know, there's plans. There's plans to do some Puppet Lando vinyl.
Oh, man. I need to add that to my collection.
We need a couple more tracks, and I think we can put out a vinyl EP of Puppet Lando. Much in the vein of Billy D. Williams' Let's Misbehave album from the 60s that inspired this whole crazy project to begin with. we want to, be step by step with Billy D. and Puppet Lando. We want them both to have very similar careers, and both of them will be launched with vinyl. So we'll see what we can do.
So apropos.
If we do it, it'd have to be a pre-order thing. So, maybe online, like on the Facebook pages or elsewhere, just say, hey, I want a Puppet Lando album. And we'll get an idea for how many people actually want one.
Put me down.
You guys can create enough of a buzz about it, then we can maybe make it happen.
Puppet Lando sings now on vinyl. All right. Well, if you want more Rebel Force Radio in your life, and why wouldn't you, with things like Puppet Lando showing up? Check us out on Patreon, as we mentioned earlier in the program. Weekly full show video is available, as well as exclusive podcasts that you won't find anywhere else except when you support Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. And it is truly one of the best community of Star Wars fans you will ever find anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
We'd also love to have you watching us and liking us and commenting on our videos over on YouTube. Check out youtube.com/Rebel Force Radio. We've got 15 years worth of archives over there, interviews with Star Wars celebrities, notables, creatives, you name it. We got it over there on YouTube. Plus, the live after shows that we've been doing since Disney Plus started putting out live action Star Wars. Well, not just live action Star Wars series in general. We've got them all there. We've got every episode of The Mandalorian, every chapter. We've got every episode of the Book of Boba Fett. We've got every episode of The Bad Batch. We got the Kenobi series. Andor, right.
It's all there.
All there. So our immediate reactions plus live phone calls that we took. So it's a great time capsule of where our heads were as those episodes were dropping. And they're really fun to revisit. So check them out. That's all on YouTube. Follow us on the socials on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We haven't posted yet, but we're on that Threads. Yeah, we're on the bleeding edge here of
haven't posted
social
yet.
media. Well, but I claimed our spot.
Yet.
I claimed
I
our
don't even know
spot.
what it is.
It's Facebook/Instagram's version of Twitter. So, yeah. So, Rebel Force Radio is on Threads. A lot of people, it was amazing. We have like 200 and some followers, and we didn't even post anything. They just found us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, check
Maybe
it out.
This Threads thing might be taken off.
Follow us over there on Threads. And, of course, the website for all things and everything, Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. But if you like the podcast and you want to help us out, the best way to help us out is to do what you're doing right now, which is you're listening or watching this podcast. Please, please, please spread the word. Let your friends know. You got that Star Wars fan in the office. You got that cousin that you always talked Star Wars with at the family reunions. Tell them about Rebel Force Radio. If your podcatcher of choice allows you to subscribe, we love to have those subscriptions. Also, your reviews. They mean so much to us. We love those reviews. And we just have one simple rule, please.
Make them good.
We'll be back next week for more Rebel Force Radio, and we're counting down the weeks until the big premiere, August 23rd of Ahsoka. We'll be bringing back the live after shows on those Wednesday nights as the episodes drop. It's going to be lots of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Love those
I can't
after
wait.
shows.
No doubt. They're awesome.
So we'll see you next time. Been a lot of fun. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
The Force will be with you, always.
Nice haircut.